I thought I'd shoot a quick video around how I actually came to be living in a very small car on the south coast of England. So I've been living in a vehicle now since 2018. It's 2025 now, so 6 or 7 years. But back when I was very young, rather than do my GCSEs at school, at night I would go fox watching. So about 11 o'clock in the evening I'd leave the house. For part of this period I was living in South London, so I'd leave the house at 11 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock PM. The house was obviously my parents' house, so I'd unlock the intricate locking system in the house, wander outside, shut the door, leave the door unlocked overnight, so I could go fox watching basically. So between about 11 o'clock at night and 3 in the morning, 3 the following morning, I'd be out studying the local kind of urban fox population. And quite often when I get tired at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd crawl under a hedge and I'd fall asleep. Bearing in mind this was South London, so an urban kind of area in the London suburbs. It's around Blackheath. I'd go fox watching, and obviously I'd failed completely my GCSEs as a result, but I did become quite an outdoorsy type, quite a kind of a robust chap in terms of being fairly self-sufficient. So that's what I would do when I was in my kind of school years between 13, 14, 15, 16 till I left school. And I obviously left school without any GCSEs because I basically failed everything because I was out at night and knackered by day. You quite often catch me crawling out from under a hedge at kind of 4 o'clock in the morning with a lovely dawn chorus. Mostly did this in summer. And startled early dog walkers would see me crawling out of this hedge, just a little teenager. But that's what I did. Failed all of my GCSEs. But I did, around about that time, I set up this campaign group against a really damaging flood alleviation scheme in South London, quaggy flood alleviation scheme. And that, after about a year of being a kind of a dropout from school campaigning guy, who knew he's already into nature and the outdoors, about a year into my campaigning life as a volunteer, didn't do any work, didn't get paid for it. The organisation I was campaigning against, who were promoting this damaging flood alleviation scheme, gave me a job. They took pity on me, I think, and gave me a job as project liaison officer for their flood alleviation scheme. So that was my first kind of foot in the door in terms of wildlife conservation. And I then began to follow a very conventional career. I started working for that organisation, the Environment Agency, National Rivers Authority, Thames region, and I worked for them for a few years. I came back to the Isle of Wight, which is where my parents were living, because they'd moved back to the island, and started working on river kind of restoration and working with farmers on the Isle of Wight. So I began, despite not having any qualifications, because I failed and I couldn't do A-levels, I still had this job. So I'd started to land a conventional career path in wildlife conservation, which is basically what I went on to pursue as a long-term career. And then I landed a job with the RSPB, Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, but it was all very conventional. I was living in house shares, in kind of sharing with other people, a room in a house share. What I never did over the next 2 or 3 decades of kind of working professionally for the RSPB and other organisations, it never occurred to me to actually buy a house. I mean, tell a lie, when I was in Exeter, so I relocated from the Isle of Wight to Salisbury, then down to Exeter, to a big office of the RSPB in Exeter. And at one stage then I did actually look at a flat, a ground floor flat along Heavy Tree Road in Exeter, and I very nearly locked myself into the mortgage game and went for that little flat. Had I done that, had I actually gone through with that, probably I would have ended up selling that flat or renting it out and then going on to another property, a bigger property, and I would have built up a little bit of a portfolio of houses, but it just never appealed. So I did momentarily look at that property, but really I didn't want to be kind of locked into that kind of way of life. I was going to walk up this way a little bit, I think. So yeah, the kind of the house buying, mortgage, handcuff approach to life never really appealed. Can I get through here? I can scramble through these shrubs, I think. But what I was doing was building up a conventional career, and then I relocated after probably 20 years. I relocated to Norwich, where there was another RSPB office, and started to work in their international division, working on Southeast Asia, projects in Southeast Asia, wildlife conservation projects in Southeast Asia. And that kind of exposed me to Thailand and Borneo, Indonesia, Sumatra particularly, and Cambodia as well. So that got me interested in the tropics. But still I was living in house shares. So, well, at that stage I had a house in Norwich, but I was commuting to the RSPB headquarters in Sandy in Bedfordshire, which entailed a train into Cambridge from Norwich, and then another train from there to Sandy. But what I also did was, because the reason I relocated to Norwich was because I wanted to go to university. This guy with no GCSEs and no A-levels wanted to go to university, and University of East Anglia was a place that did actually offer potential mature students without an undergraduate degree, which I didn't have, an opportunity to do a master's degree in ecology if they didn't already have an undergrad degree, as long as they did a undergraduate diploma in ecology, which is a one-year course. So I relocated to Norwich, worked part-time with the RSPB, and started this undergraduate diploma. I was kind of accepted onto the course by University of East Anglia, bless them. So I started to study for an undergraduate diploma in ecology, which I succeeded on, did pretty well on that, despite my lack of GCSEs and A-levels, and then went on to do the Masters in ecology at University of East Anglia as well. So that was over 3 years, I think, or 4 years even. But still, I was living the conventional kind of life, as in living in rented accommodation. But then came the last 6 months of that course, the MSc course, when I ran out of money, and basically I started to sleep in a room on campus. Nobody knew I was doing that, but I'd have all my gear stored in a secret cupboard in one of the rooms there, and I'd pull that all out in the evening and I'd crash on the floor. I had a roll mat and a mattress and a pillow, and that's all I needed really, because there was microwaves in the room and a kettle, so I had all I needed really to survive pretty well for 6 months, which I did. Also had a tent which I occasionally pitched outside if there was an event going on, which meant I couldn't stay on campus overnight in that particular room because it was being used. So that was all good, and that was the first, apart from the fox watching when I was very young, that was the first real indication that things would go a bit awry with me in terms of being conventional or not being conventional. And then when I finished the MSc, I was looking for opportunities because I'd left the RSPB by then and worked for the World Land Trust for a couple of years. But I was looking for opportunities to actually get overseas. I was doing all these international projects with these organisations, and my MSc studies were all focused on the tropics. But I really wanted to get out into the tropics rather than studying or working on them whilst being based in temperate UK, temperate England. So that's what I did. I looked around for opportunities to go overseas. That's when I got wind of a project that was going on in Cambodia to study prey density of tigers. So there were no tigers in Cambodia, and there still aren't, but the government and some conservation NGOs were looking at whether you could reintroduce tigers to Cambodia, Indo-Chinese tigers. And so I went out there, funded by the government of Cambodia, plus Worldwide Fund for Nature and Wildlife Conservation Society and others. I went out there to help survey small mammal or large mammal populations, things like banteng and gaur, which are wild cattle species, various deer, sambar deer, elds deer, that kind of stuff. And I ended up living out in a very, very, very remote patch of forest in the eastern plains of Cambodia, living in hammocks basically at a field camp with 5 or 6 other Khmer kind of staff, local Cambodian people that were doing the main survey work. I was just helping them out. And so for months during the dry season, I was living out in a hammock in the middle of a forest in Cambodia, which just reminded me how much I enjoyed that kind of slightly unconventional way of living. Then I came home, back to the UK, crashed at my parents' house here in Ventnor on the Isle of Wight, which is where I am now. As you can probably see, there's a Royal Hotel. And things began to crack then. Probably my brain, to be honest. I began to live much less conventionally, and I really got used to roughing it, is probably the most polite way of putting it. I went down to Cornwall. After the first trip to Cambodia, I went down to Cornwall and started a PhD, believe it or not. A long-running saga that hasn't been completed properly yet. And then there, to save money, I purchased a bivouac, which is basically a sleeping bag sized tent. It just looks like a sleeping bag, but it's waterproof and breathable, so it's effectively a tent. And I lived in there for a few months. Well, I slept in there for a few months, but then I started to sleep at the Falmouth Backpackers, so a backpackers place in Falmouth. Let's turn you around. Better view that way. And but that was costing quite a lot of money. So that was, I think I moved in there, it's probably September, October, when it started to get cold one year, down in Cornwall. Usually gets wet and miserable rather than cold in Cornwall. But and then in February, this was February 2018, I had a chat with the landlady, or the person that owned the Falmouth Backpackers, saying I need to rent a room somewhere because I didn't want to go back into my little bivvy bag over winter. So I had a look at a little room next door, which was, I think it was £600 rent per month, plus bills on top of that, so £700 or £800 per month that would have cost me. And then Judy, who was the owner of the Falmouth Backpackers at the time, sadly closed down now because of COVID, or at the same time as COVID struck, she closed down. And Judy said, well, hang on a minute, I want to trade in my Citroen Berlingo. And I said, well, so what? I don't need a car. And she said, well, no, she lives, or she goes surfing, and when she goes surfing, she'll sleep in the van she's got. And said, why don't you get a van and sleep in that rather than renting a room in a shared house or living in a bivouac or staying at this hostel, this youth hostel. She said, just buy this little van and do what I do, just rather than do it once every few days or once or twice a week, sleep in it, just live in it all the time. And she pointed out that loads of people in Cornwall do that. All the surfers have their vans kitted out as for Vanlife. And she suggested I look into doing that. And that's basically what I did. So what happened was, she said, well, she'll sell me the van for £600 rather than trading it in. So the same price as a month's worth of renting in a rented room, basically under the stairs kind of broom cupboard, basically was what that room was. She said, rather than doing that, why don't you just buy this van? Then you've got a house for however long the van lasts for. It was obviously quite an old van at that price. But I did buy the van. And that evening I went to Trago Mills, or that day I went to Trago Mills. This was the day of the conversation. I bought the van there and then. Went to Trago Mills there and then. Purchased a sleeping bag and a camping stove. And moved into a little van. This was February 2018. And that first night was absolute bliss. I adored that kind of way of living. And there was frost, and because it was a blizzardy cold snap in Cornwall at the time, there was ice on the inside of the van when I woke up the following morning. It's like a building site here. This is La Falaise car park. It really does look like a building site. They're removing asbestos from that shelter, apparently. Yeah, so basically, February 2018, I moved into that little Citroen Berlingo. There was already a mattress, or not mattress, there was foam covering the floor because as I said, Judy, the owner, used to use the van to sleep in when she went surfing around Cornwall. She lived in Falmouth. The best place for surfing is Newquay, Fistral Beach, and she used to go down there quite frequently. And so all I needed was a sleeping bag and the pillow, and I don't think I got a pillow, to be honest, just a sleeping bag and a stove and a kettle and some water and that kind of stuff. So I bought enough to make tea in the morning. I probably bought some porridge oats as well to make porridge in the morning, I can't remember. Point is, I then lived in that car for 6 years, that van, the Berlingo. So £100 a year, basically, my living accommodation cost me. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Obviously there were some costs, probably about £1,500 I subsequently spent keeping that van on the road until it finally gave up the ghost in, I think it was just before Christmas 2023. And that's when I moved into a little shed down here in Ventnor Bay. I'm not going to say where it is, but I lived in there over that winter. And then I think it was February 2024, was it? Or it might have been 2023, I can't remember, but I eventually found my little Citroen C1, tiny little car, and I thought I can live in that. So that's what I purchased that for £500, and now it's 2025, and it's June 2025, and I'm still living in it. So I now live in a little tiny Citroen C1, and I'm usually to be found here in Ventnor Bay. But yeah, that's an account of how I came to be living in the vehicle, kind of a longer term account than I've given before, I think. And that is all detailed in my book, Breaking Free. My little booklet gives a more kind of thorough life backstory. Well, it is now a lovely evening, as you can see. The winter's beginning to drop off now, and this coming week looks set to be less windy and warm, finally, which will be nice. Let's go and have a quick look down at the beach. It's going to be a nice sunset, I think. Thanks everyone for all your comments, of which there are plenty. It's really nice to see so much kind of interaction on the channel. Do comment as much as you like. I'm not always fast replying because I've got a few deadlines I've got to meet with this project I'm doing in Dorset at the moment. So swifts above calling. So don't always reply as quickly as I would like to, but hopefully by the end of the year, well, by the end of the summer probably, I will have finished that job in Dorset, and I'll have a lot more time to do a lot more videos and reply a lot more to comments and write a lot more in my books. As it is, I'm really, really, really busy, but your support is very much appreciated, and do watch some of my other videos. That's a really good way to support the channel. The tide is going out. I need to hit a day when the tide is out during the day so I can go down and film the rock pools and fly the drone over. Flying a drone slowly over rock pools will make a really nice steady bit of footage. So I want to try and do that as soon as the tide is out, in daylight rather than overnight. And when it's sunny as well is the main thing, so the seaweed looks lovely. It's not a cloud in the sky, so it's going to warm up. Hopefully, I think the wind is going to drop off. The breeze has certainly dropped off this afternoon, and hopefully it will continue to drop off. And I think they're saying it's going to be up to 27 degrees in Ventnor by the end of this coming week. It's Sunday now. We don't often get it too hot, actually, right on the bit coast here, because there's always a sea breeze. When it warms up, the breeze tends to pick up a little bit and cools everyone down a bit, which is always nice. So tonight I'm going to cook some stir-fried chicken. I'll go back to the car in a minute. Quite it's breezy here. You can probably hear the breeze. I'll go back to the car in a minute and start cooking. Just wanted to give a nice view of the bay from here before the sun sets, or at least before the sun dips behind Ventnor Park. It won't set for a couple more hours. It's only about 6:30 in the evening now. Look at that. Let's have a quick look round in the harbour. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, and check out my books, Wildlife Watching Around Ventnor, Bird Watching Around Ventnor, and Breaking Free is the latest one, which is all about my living in a car and what my plans are for the next, well, between now and the end of 2026. Oh, there goes the gimbal. Confused it a bit. Yeah, that book, Breaking Free, to which there is a link in the description, is all about how I'm developing a lifestyle around living in a vehicle and building multiple streams of income. So check that little book out. All my books are small, quick reads, but they get good reviews, so hopefully they're good. God, there's lots of smelly seaweed in the harbour today, or at the moment. Very deep, smelly seaweed. If you've ever been to Ventnor and smelt the seaweed pong, you'll know what I mean. Anyway, I'm going to go and make some food in the car, I think. It's looking good. Looking forward to eating that stir-fried chicken with veggies. Very nice. And a lovely view as well.